Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. How are you all doing today? Thank you so much for joining us for this part 3 of What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Today, we're going to be talking about engaging top talent with a meaningful employer brand. So I just want to start real quick, as we have the last couple of sessions, just making sure everybody can hear me okay. So if you could all just drop a quick note in the chat, letting me know that you can hear me, that would be great. All right, great. Awesome. So glad to have you all on with us this morning. All right, so we're going to dive right in because we've got a lot of information to cover. So here are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. First and foremost, what is an employer brand? Giving you an understanding of what exactly we're talking about when we say employer brand, and why does that matter? Why is it something that your company or your organization should be concerned with? Of course, we don't want to just give you the information and then leave you hanging. So we definitely want to give you some best practices for getting started with that employer brand strategy, and also develop an understanding of how that employer brand relates to everything after you've gotten an employee on board with your organization. So through the preboarding, onboarding, and even offboarding process. We're going to talk through all of that today. As you know, we've had a couple of sessions now with my co-presenter, Elizabeth Cipolla, who is the leader of the human capital practice here at Decision Associates. And Elizabeth is on the call today. She's going to be helping me manage the chat for me and keep track of the questions that are asked. So Elizabeth, if you would, just as those come in, draw my attention to those, because since I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat box. So Elizabeth, just a little bit about her. She has, as you can see, her background here, but through the human capital practice, she's really worked to enhance the services that we offer. So certainly, through the executive recruitment, as well as a culture service offering that we have now. And some additional services, of course, strategic planning. We do some human resources audit work. And Elizabeth is certainly, I think, from my perspective, a fantastic mentor that I'm really glad to have leading the practice. Also on the call today is Aaron Phillips, the owner of Decision Associates. Aaron, I don't know if you want to say a quick hello to everybody.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. And thank you to especially Amanda and Elizabeth for putting these on. And so really excited to have everyone joining us.
Awesome. Thank you. And I've introduced myself a few times already, so you can see my background there. The reason why this employer brand session was something that I was really excited about was because it feeds really well into my marketing background, which you'll see there. I've worked for several years now with both nonprofits and for-profit companies in various areas of consulting, and it's something I really enjoy, just helping you all to be more successful in what you do. So with that, we're going to dive into today's content. So when we talk about an employer brand, realistically, it's not that different from your customer brand. It's just an answer to a different question. So when you think of your employer or your customer brand, it's, why would I want to buy that? Or what's in it for me? Well, the employer brand is really the answer to the question, what's it like to work there? So if you think about the reputation that your organization has among potential and current employees, but also out in the public, the answer to that, what's it like to work there question, the elements that come through in that, that's what makes up your employer brand. Your company culture is,
yeah, I'm so sorry, Amanda. I just wanted to let you know, someone had mentioned that your screen is in presenter mode. So you might want to change that. I just wanted to let you know.
Let me see.
They just put it in the chat. So you probably
is that better?
That is better. Thank you.
There we go. Thanks so much. Okay, so moving on with your company culture being reflected in your employer brand. One thing that I will say is something to keep in mind throughout this presentation and as you embark on addressing your employer brand is transparency. That is a huge, huge factor through all of this. So just a couple of stats to kind of set the stage for you. So 77% of adults consider a company's culture before applying for a job there. Over 50% of those respondents said culture is more important than salary related to job satisfaction. And 73% would not apply to a company unless its values aligned with their own personal ones. So what does this mean for you? And what does this translate to as far as we're concerned, from a recruitment and retention perspective? So I think, certainly one of the things Elizabeth and I were fortunate enough to attend this SHRM, which is a human resources organization, professional organization, talent conference this year. And one thing that was shared consistently in several of the sessions is that we're seeing a shift. And that is, related to where candidates previously were really focused on compensation, company prestige, things like that. Now we're seeing compensation and, the prestige of the company name moving further down on the list as far as things that applicants consider through the process. Now we're seeing a higher occurrence of professional development, mentorship, social responsibility, other similar areas. Those are ranking higher as things that people pay attention to when they're looking for a company they want to work for. So what this means for you is, again, transparency. In our own work, I know we're getting more questions early on about cultural fit. We're seeing candidates be more vocal early on in the process about what kind of culture that they're looking for and really sticking to their guns. I, in fact, had a conversation with a candidate the other day where she said, this sounds like a really interesting opportunity, and I appreciate you sharing some information about it with me, but it just seems like the culture is not quite what I'm looking for. And great, that's awesome that she's done the work on her end ahead of time. She knows what she's looking for. She's sticking to it. But those are conversations that are going to be happening more frequently. And Erin and Elizabeth, I would love for either or both of you to comment on some of the things that you're seeing as well, especially related to also on the other side of that coin, organizations needing to be more comfortable with sharing compensation, benefits, other related information upfront.
Thank you, Amanda. Last week, I think we mentioned that all of a sudden, the questions that were taboo early in an interview process are now actually happening. And, there's more, if you think about a posting, I see more compensation elements listed in postings than I ever have before. I can't tell you what percentage now have compensation listed right in them, but much more than before. But as a company, I know that, sometimes I've been with, as an employer, when you get put off sometimes when a person will ask about compensation or ask about benefits at the beginning. And, so we have to shift our mindset. We have to, they want to know about the benefits. They want to know about compensation. They want to know about what it's like to work here right from the jump off. And so I think in the past, as a hiring manager, it would be like, wow, that they're that, I think they're trying to, put the cart before the horse, looking at benefits. When I'm just having a first conversation, these individuals are having multiple conversations with multiple employers. And so for us to get comfortable sharing more information early on is going to be extremely important. And so I think that's the only piece I would say to that, Amanda.
Absolutely. Elizabeth, anything to add?
I would agree with that. And another thing to point out, I know not everybody who's participating in this webinar is necessarily recruiting for positions that would require relocation, but I'll just point out, aside from compensation and benefits, especially if you're also trying to attract candidates from outside of the market to potentially want to relocate to where your organization is for a physical move, it's also really important to be as transparent and upfront as possible about what it is the community offers, right? And, so giving them a realistic, transparent perspective on where they are potentially going to relocate, themselves, as well as potentially their entire family if they have more than themselves that would be relocating. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. It's really, really important to have all of your information upfront, things that maybe in the past you would have thought to yourself, I'll just wait till this person's a definite finalist, and just make sure you're prepared on the front end with as much information as possible. Because bottom line, if you're not doing that, the people you're competing against for the same talent, they are, and they'll go to where they have the information.
Absolutely. Really well said. And I think the final point that I'll make, related to this aspect of culture being reflected in your brand is that, your culture is also reflected in your company values. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But I think, one of the things that, especially to that last statistic there, do the company's values align with my own personal ones? So communicating the values that your company has and communicating effectively what it's like, again, what it's like to work at your company or at your organization, that really matters now more than ever. So why does it matter is the question. The better you are at being able to effectively manage your employer brand, the more likely it is that you'll be able to attract and retain top talent. Employer brand, whether you manage it or not, it's something that more and more job seekers are taking into consideration while they assess whether or not to even apply to a company. They're doing their homework, they're doing their research, they're looking at your social media presence, they're looking at your website, they're looking at what people are saying on review sites. And so how are you managing all of those pieces? And really, to the second point there, with a reduction in turnover and a cut in cost per hire, it's a dollars and cents game as well. So thinking about how this is going to overall impact the overall amount of money that this is costing your organization to attract and retain talent, you really can't afford to ignore it, especially as we all know, the recruitment market is becoming even more challenging. Also, again, 75% of active job seekers are likely to apply for a position if the employer manages its brand. So it's just kind of a non-negotiable at this point. I'm going to stop here and make an important point that if you take nothing else from today's session, I hope that you remember this point, and that is that this employer brand, much like your brand that you promote to your customers and to your clients, it requires intention and ongoing effort. This is not something that you put up a nice page on your website or put up some posts via social media and you forget about it. This is something that requires effort over time, and it requires walking the walk. Telling your employees and your prospective employees and the general public that your organization is a great place to work is not enough. You really have to walk the walk in every single aspect of the process of the touch points that you have with your current and potential employees. So this brings up the question of who really owns employer branding? And the answer to that question is everybody. This is not something that is limited to the HR function or the marketing function. It is directly tied to each and every experience your employees have during their time at the company. Everything from who says hello to them in the hallway to how frequently the CEO is out among the team, to how communication flows through your organization. Again, keeping in mind the question of what's it like to work there? Thinking about when a potential employee asks a current employee, "Oh, what do you think about this place? I'm thinking about applying for a job there." They're not going to talk about how great your products or service are. Well, they might, but it's not going to be their first point. They're going to relay stories of their experiences with the company. I had a really, really frustrating exchange with one of my colleagues the other day, and here's how it played out. Those are the stories they're going to be telling. So you need to be doing your work on the back end in conjunction with HR and marketing, of course, where you are giving your employees the messages that you want them to share about what it's like to work there. And again, it all comes back to walking the walk, because just giving them the messaging doesn't mean they're going to use it. They have to feel the aspects, every single aspect of the employer brand to their core. to be able to feel comfortable expressing those points to someone else. I will also say, and this goes back to a point Elizabeth made in our first session, I believe, your digital first impression matters. So much like when you're establishing a brand that's going to be outward facing, when you're looking at an internal brand, you need to start by listening. What are current and past employees saying about you online? Start with the common review sites, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Indeed, and then a couple of the women specific Fairy God Boss in her site. Even Google, certainly some employee reviews pop up in Google reviews periodically. So monitoring all of those and getting a sense of what the conversation is before you start the work really helps. This is where you can tap into the person who does marketing or the department who does marketing within your organization. They should be doing work around this normally on a customer side. So this is just kind of shifting the focus a little bit, but the platforms are largely the same in how they function. So get a sense of what's being said out there first. Then as you look to start developing your strategy, it really needs to start with your mission, vision, and values. Again, very similar to developing a brand that's going to be external facing. Make sure you're thinking about how your mission, vision, and values reflect within your organization. Also developing an employer value proposition, much like a unique value proposition that you would create for something that's external. It's the answer to the question, what's in it for me in your customer's minds? So you kind of approach it with the same perspective for a potential employee. What is this employee going to get out of working for my organization? Your employer value proposition should be then spread across all of your channels, your website, your recruitment materials, your LinkedIn company page. It should also be included in the interview process, not just with your HR team. Again, I will emphasize, not just HR, but with every person that candidate is going to be speaking with on behalf of your organization. They need to have an understanding of what exactly are we advertising to people as far as why would they want to work here. Your employer value proposition should never, ever, ever be based on compensation. It should speak to the important elements of your culture. If you're basing it on compensation, it's just, you're not going to align with the types of candidates that you want to bring into your organization. You're not going to keep the types of candidates that you want within your organization. For example, there's a company called Accenture. It's a global professional services firm. They talk on their website about, if you work for us, you're working at the heart of change, you're bringing your ideas, your ingenuity, and your determination to make a difference. And we create positive, long-lasting value for our clients. Their careers page goes a little bit more in depth about that. And you'll see some other examples here in just a minute, but really speaking to, okay, help me understand, based on what I know about myself as a candidate, what is this experience going to add to my life, really, because we spend so much of our lives working. This has to be an enhancement. This should also be built with elements that influence job seekers' decisions. So as I mentioned, thinking about mentorship opportunities within your organization. Are there, if you have an organization with a lot of employees or a larger number of employees, can you create affinity groups? How can we address career pathing and understanding what the future looks like for this particular employee as they have the opportunity to progress through the organization? Thinking about things other than compensation, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to make here. The other piece of this is storytelling as well. This is where your current employees start to get involved in the process. Why do they work for your organization? What's motivated them to stay? And this is where we start talking about getting their insight into what do they like about working for your organization. These are just some sample questions you might want to start contemplating, as well as start gathering some groups of your employees around. There are a few different ways you can do this. You can, do a large scale survey to get some feedback from your employees. You can also have focus groups if you work with the managers within your organization and you say, you know what, let's identify some of the really top performing, high performing talent within our organization. The people that we say, if I could clone this person and have multiples of them throughout our organization, here's why, and these are the elements that we're looking for. So you can start to build a profile of what that ideal employee looks like. You need to develop an understanding also of how the organization is perceived by employees at different levels. So we're not just looking for a conversation between the leadership team. This needs to involve every single person from the very top to the very entry level positions in the organization. Everybody's feedback matters. Erin and Elizabeth, I would love to hear some feedback from both of you to share maybe some things that you've seen or heard as far as gathering feedback from employees, or even to that second point, talking with them about why they've decided to stick around.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, doing something like that definitely, and we've seen it in practice. We've actually used this in practice even long before the pandemic made it even more important to do so. And really, I'd just like to point out that it's something that's a really good practice to consider doing, even on an annual basis, to be honest, not just in a reactive sense when you think that there's a problem that needs to be managed, but in a proactive sense, so you can always keep an eye on proactively, identifying what it is that's causing people to be happy and to want to stay. What are some of the areas of opportunity so that you can proactively get those addressed to protect your most critical assets, obviously the people that work in your organization. But just some examples, I guess, of how I would recommend just some best practices is really try to focus on asking questions to really understand what your employees want most on the job, what they feel is lacking, and what potentially might make them consider leaving for another position. So while your questions are important, and I can even rattle off a few examples of questions to ask if you'd like, and I'll do that in a moment, it's also extraordinarily important to demonstrate careful listening, because that's going to demonstrate a real interest in their success. And whenever possible, I always encourage, employers to sit down and face-to-face have a conversation with employees, and you know what? I just thought of something. I'm even happy. I have it's called the retention toolkit for managers. I'm happy to even distribute this toolkit as part of the follow-up email that you have, that you'll be receiving with a recording. And it will give you a step-by-step guide for exactly how to facilitate this process. So yes, I will get that sent out to everybody. But just an example, some questions. You want to understand, how they first decided to take the position in your respective department, what it is they like most about working there, what are some of the things they find to be less positive, if there's anything that, and then you want to really break it down from there. You want to ask them specific questions related to opportunities for growth. How much do they feel they can still grow on the job? Are they receiving the types of challenges they want, that are meaningful to them? Opportunities to contribute in a meaningful way. The people they work with, do they feel that they are getting the support they need? There are a million questions, but honestly, this toolkit that we'll be sharing with everybody who has signed up for this webinar will break it down in a really easy to follow way. So put it into practice and you'll see the results for sure.
And
Great, thank
just
you.
to add a few, we're seeing employers, and so for the folks that are local in Erie to where we are, we're seeing employers pay more attention to the employer value proposition. You're seeing employees in commercials, right? I mean, this over the last, it started pre-pandemic when there was, hiring issues, and it has continued and escalated. So they're really paying attention, and they're having employees talk about what it's like to work there, and they're using that as a tool. I think the only thing that I will add is that, I mean, it boils down to communication, and as as Elizabeth mentioned, careful listening, and making those conversations, having those in pieces. And there's two pieces with it. One is please don't get defensive when people, when you're going to be asking questions that open yourself up as an employer to vulnerabilities. Don't get defensive about it. Don't try and defend it. Try and learn from it. And the other is take action. If there are things that, if you're listening to people, if you're reaching out and engaging them, and they're giving you feedback, if you take action on those items, because in the end, if we're not, first of all, they won't continue to, provide that feedback. Second, they may just, apathy is the worst, right? Well, I talked to them about that. I told them, they asked me my thoughts, and they never even got back to me. They never, shared other follow-up with me. So don't get defensive. Take it in stride and make sure you're taking action. That's the only thing I would add, Amanda.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, it's just like we tell our clients as we work through the culture services that we offer. There is no point in doing any of this work with gathering feedback from your existing team unless you have every intention and you have a plan in place to take action on it. Because there's nothing worse than going to your team and saying, "Hey, we really want your feedback on this," and then promptly doing nothing with it. Because to Erin's point, they're not going to be very likely to give feedback again in the future. So it's important to, gather that feedback, do something with it, and really be intentional about how you're demonstrating that to your existing team. Making it very clear, "Hey, we heard you. Thank you so much for sharing this input. Here's what we did with it. Here's the outcome." That process is incredibly, incredibly important because, again, your employer brand is about walking the walk. So making sure that you are truly living up to that employer value proposition. A couple other points I would just add related to that last point there. Two other things that you can do. Competitor research certainly is valuable in this area, just like it is as you're assessing your external brand. How are you promoting your employer brand, your competitors? How are they doing it at all? Is it a page that's thrown up on the website and maybe a couple posts on social media, or is it a really robust, clear strategy? And what can you learn from that? The other piece, I think, don't neglect the people who applied for jobs, were offered the position, and declined. Reach out to them after the fact. Try to get some understanding of what was it about your company that missed the mark for them? What was it about the opportunity that missed the mark for them? Was it, what was it about the company that they selected that really attracted their attention? Certainly reach out. You may not hear back, but I think, again, this is where it speaks to, oh, wow, they really do care about their employees, even the people who say, "No, thank you." There's an opportunity there to potentially make a fan out of this employee who said no thank you, and maybe when they're looking for a job in the future, they reconsider your organization simply because you showed that, you know what, even though you said no, I still care about your opinion. That goes a really long way. So what else? Getting creative about how you're sharing the message. In order to maintain your employer brand, because remember, this is an ongoing process at the level that's going to attract and retain top talent, you have to walk the walk consistently. Even though your current employees are on board, you must make sure that they are recipients of the employer branding just as much, if not more so, than prospective employees, because they're the ones that have to be able to communicate it to others outside of your organization. So if you're not doing your due diligence and making sure they understand, here's our employer brand, here's what that means, this was created based on your feedback, they need to be part of that process from start to ongoing. I'm not going to say finished because it's never completely finished. Ask your employees to post online when your organization does outings or team building activities or giveaways or reaches major project milestones. Encourage them to share and give them the assets to do so. Share company logos, photos from events, brand standards. Make sure that they have the tools to create the types of posts that you want them to create. And encourage them to take their own photos and videos to post as well. Additionally, I think this is where, transparency again comes into play. I think giving people a window into your organization is and a genuine window, one that's not generated solely from the marketing department, that's really meaningful, and it goes a long way to attracting the right kind of talent. So what else as we move through this process? The employee feedback and surveys related to culture and employer brand, as Elizabeth alluded to just a minute ago, that has to be an ongoing process. This is not under any circumstances a single survey at the beginning of your work on this, and then you never do it again, because your employer brand's going to evolve, right? As your company or your organization goes through different scenarios, as you face different challenges. COVID, certainly great example. Your organization looks different now, or at least it should, coming out of, on the other side of the major shutdowns caused by COVID. How did that impact your organization, and how is your organization being transparent? Because let me tell you, that is especially related to, layoffs and people's positions being eliminated. That's something that employees, current and future, are going to be very sensitive to. Be transparent about the way that your company or your organization responded to COVID. What did you do? How did you maintain communications with your employees? How did you maintain your employer brand throughout those challenges, throughout that process? Setting up, and again, this is an area where you can tap into the expertise of your marketing person or people. Setting up social listening tools, doing some search term exploration via Google and other platforms to start paying attention to questions that people are asking and comments that they're making related to what it's like to work there. That needs to be, again, an ongoing process. A lot of the same rules apply for social media marketing, again, with your external brand, as it does to management of your employer brand. I will say an interesting statistic that I saw as it related to this presentation when I was doing a little research was that 80% of Glassdoor users say that their perception of a company improves after seeing an employer respond to a review. And the interesting part about this is that they didn't see, a sway of, well, when they respond to only positive reviews. Nope, it's responding to reviews across the board, positive and negative. Because certainly, we strive for 100% happiness in our organization with our employees, but we also have to be realistic. So responding to the negative comments as well, not just letting them sit out there and be a black cloud over your organization. Responding to that, same thing, just like you would respond to a negative review about your organization from a customer or a client. Same situation here. Take the time, respond to the review, be polite, be respectful. Again, to Erin's point, taking the defensive stance, not attractive to job seekers or even frankly to current employees, but taking the time to respond and show that you're actively managing your brand goes a long way. So I want to show you a couple examples of employers who are doing it right. So this is a company called Willowtree. They are a company that designs and builds various digital products, apps, things like that. So I took a few screenshots of the information that's available on their website via their careers page. And I want to draw your attention to a few things. So first on this slide, they come right out and say, very top of their career page, here's our culture. We promote a culture of makers who are passionately curious about their craft. I love that phrase, passionately curious. We hire innovative, growth-minded talent, talks about autonomy and longevity of cross-discipline teams, decisions made from within the teams, not from the top down. So it's very easy for a potential employee candidate to start assessing whether or not the culture of Willowtree is going to be a good fit for what they're looking for. It starts right away. If you scroll down on the page a little bit further, they have some various sections that I think speak to the point that I made just a few minutes ago about how are you presenting your organization to potential applicants? How are you speaking to the areas that really matter to them? So there's some points, generally speaking, about compensation through the page, but it doesn't focus on that at all. This is one of the first sections that comes up. It's about mentorship. We're a community of smart and talented people. That could be intimidating. We have lots of opportunities, all hands Q&As, Slack channels. We have ways for you to connect with your fellow team members. Oh, by the way, you're also assigned both a short and a long-term mentor who can serve as a sounding board for you. Also a great way to help a new employee integrate into the company more effectively, because they have people that they can go to with questions on a regular basis and know that that person is there specifically for the purpose of helping them succeed. This is a great way also to engage remote employees. If you have team members who are located all over the country, awesome way to help them integrate into the organization. They also talk about skill building. So certainly one of the things that will attract an employee to your organization is if you are giving them opportunities to expand their skill set. So I'll draw your attention to that second paragraph there. Team members are expected to utilize 85% of their time on client work, leaving an intentional window for other personal and Willowtree related goals. So whether that's social impact projects, professional development, you pick how you want to spend that time. And they want you to be the driver of that. You identify, I'd really love to learn more about this function in the company, or, this social impact project is something that's interesting to me, or I'd really like to spend more time volunteering for this organization because I believe in their mission. So I'd like to spend my time doing that. The employees get to build what that looks like. So giving them ownership over that process, again, just lets them see truly how important it is to the organization that they develop themselves professionally. And I think one of the other things, even, at a more basic level, I think speaking to my own personal experience coming on board here with Decision Associates, in my very first few conversations with Erin and Elizabeth before I came on board, it was, we would love for you to explore some different certifications or credentials, and we'll allow you the time to study for those and prepare for those, and we're here if you need help or have questions through that process. Being able to attend the SHRM Talent Conference and do that, that was held during work hours, and the fact that Erin allowed Elizabeth and I to take that time to develop ourselves professionally and understand what's going on in the market, so we can come back and share that with our clients. That's hugely important. Another area that Willowtree does really well is the community outreach piece. So, a lot of companies we see addressing areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And oftentimes, I think too often, those are just flashy words that we see on the website or on social media, and there's not really a whole lot of meat behind it. So we have Willowtree here saying, we're going to do something related to the work that we do. We're a tech company. We do app development and other digital product development. So we're going to work specifically on improving access to technology for women and minorities. It's no secret that there's definitely a lack of diversity in the tech industry. You have organizations like Girls Who Code. We have, the company or the group here in Erie, Celebrate Women in Tech. There's definitely a need to get more diversity into the tech industry. And so this particular organization does a lot of community outreach. They partner with different local nonprofits focusing on access, education, mentorship, and they encourage, again, their employees to get involved with it. So they give them opportunities during company time that allow them to fulfill that social responsibility side of things. And again, going back to those points that I mentioned earlier about here's what employees are looking for, potential employees are looking for as they assess the companies that they want to apply to. All of this stuff matters. Again, if they're looking at their own personal values and they're seeing all of this reflected on your website, wow. I mean, can you imagine as a potential candidate for a position, before I've even applied, I'm just doing some general research. I saw this position. It seems like it might be interesting. Based on, and I would encourage you to check out their website to see the full scope of what they do. It's really, really impressive. And if you scroll to the bottom of their page, get through everything and think to yourself, man, I kind of want to apply here. Super interesting. Elizabeth and Aaron, no worries. I'm staying, not applying to Willowtree. Another company that I want to show you is Classy. They are an organization geared toward nonprofits. They do a lot of online fundraising offer a platform for online fundraising. And similar to Willowtree, they've got some really interesting points on their careers page and looking at how they're selling themselves to potential employees. One of the first points that's made on the page is about career path. Understanding here's what your future could look like within our organization, but also if you're just interested in, say, marketing or human resources, generally speaking, let's help you identify what your career path looks like overall, whether that's with Classy in the future or not. That matters. Taking the time to understand, what your candidate or what your employees want out of their career moving into the future, that's really important. Culture is another piece that they have highlighted. And this is where we see a little bit more directly than what Willowtree offered, 10 paid half days a year, 10 paid holidays a year, flexible time off, remote flexibility, parental leave benefits, open office downtown, quarterly socials and events. And some of these are great, especially the socials and events, great for remote employees. You can get a little more specific to the point we made at the beginning of the session about compensation and being more transparent with the types of benefits your company offers. You can do it in a general sense like this, but I would also recommend being more transparent on the actual job posting and even more so, listing what you have here, but also, giving compensation ranges and things like that, because employees are asking, or potential employees are asking at the beginning of the process anyway. So you need to get comfortable with putting the information out there. I would also encourage and draw your attention to the fact that they say flexible time off. So what that doesn't say is unlimited time off. And this is an area where you want to be careful. My husband actually works for a company that offers quote unquote unlimited paid time off. Let me tell you how many vacation days he has taken in the past year. It's just shy of a week. So unlimited time off tends to translate to people don't use it because there's not a particular guideline. So you want to be careful with how you word that. And really, again, that's where you can talk to your employees, your current employees, your current management team, and see what works for them. Again, to the point that Elizabeth just put in the chat, asking your employees what they like most about working at your organization to help you understand the best way to articulate the perks of your culture. It's going to be unique to your organization. It has to be. Recognition. Just some really cool things. We like to celebrate special events, right? Who doesn't enjoy a good celebration of, hey, we completed this project and we got over the finish line together. Hey, this was a really, really tough quarter and we all got through it together. We supported each other. Let's celebrate that. Work anniversaries, they offer a paid sabbatical leave for every 4 years that you're with the company. Company awards, milestone celebrations. Just celebrate the good things that are happening in your organization. It's easy to get focused, especially in light of what's happened with COVID. It's easy to focus on the stuff that's been really hard. Okay, we're going to make it through having the all hands meetings around. These are the changes that we have to make. And oh my gosh, are they going to announce more layoffs? your employees should not be scared of all hands events and conversations, because if they are, that means you're not doing it right. You need to be celebrating the wins just as much as you're talking about the tough stuff, if not more so, definitely more so. So as we look at, okay, you've promoted your employer brand, you've gotten them to the point where they're applying for the position, they're going into the interview process, they've been offered the position, they've accepted. So now we're at the pre-boarding, onboarding phase. Your pre-boarding and onboarding processes absolutely have to be assessed through the lens of your employer brand. How are you delivering now on the promises that you've been making throughout the hiring process? So if you think about it's, you're making all these promises, you're saying all this stuff that you're going to do, how are you delivering on that, starting the very second that they enter really the interview process and then moving through the other parts of it? I'm going to mention a couple of thoughts here that I've seen other companies do through my research and that seem to have worked very well for them. But then I also want Elizabeth and Aaron to weigh in. Really making sure that you have a lot of different touch points, whether that's emails, Zoom conversations, videos, before they even come on board, sending them welcome messages from the team, sharing their favorite parts about working for the organization, videos, messages, resources from key stakeholders within the company. Hey, this is a member of the team that you're probably going to be working with really frequently, and allow them to introduce themselves. Easily accessible FAQs. Start building a resource of Q&A that speak to things that frequently come up as questions from new and current employees. And again, this is another area where you can tap into your existing base. What do you wish you would have known, first thing when you started at the company? And start building a Q&A resource from that you can share with new employees. A swag box, swag box really goes a long way. Something I've seen an interesting spin on this, and I can't remember the company that was doing it now, but essentially what they did was they built a swag box around elements of their culture or core values, and then they scheduled a Zoom call with the new employee when they received the box to do an unboxing, and the person from the company or from the organization would actually walk the new hire through every element that was in the box and explain to them, okay, this represents this element of our culture, and here's why this is important to us, and here's what that means for you as an employee now. Whoop, I want to go back there just a second. I think also through the onboarding process as well, creating quote unquote magic moments, doing a little bit of research and homework on your candidates, asking questions through the interview process that give some insight into their hobbies, their favorite things. As an example, when I started here at DA, Elizabeth had done some homework and she knew that my favorite color is purple. So she gave me some purple supplies for my desk, and it's stuff that I use every single day. And it makes me smile when I look at it, because it's like, they really care about me as a person. I'm not just somebody sitting behind a desk doing work for the company. So those are some things that I've seen or researched that work really well. But Aaron and Elizabeth, I'd love for you both to jump in with any exceptional onboarding or pre-boarding processes that you've experienced or researched.
Sure, absolutely. I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I guess just some food for thought. Another way to articulate the point you're trying to make is pre-boarding is really about transforming that traditional onboarding approach. And it's less about, the transactions that are involved in starting a new job, like, filling out the forms, looking at the organizational chart, understanding how to enroll in healthcare benefits, all about those things. And pre-boarding is not about that, but rather it's about that emotional experience of joining your organization and really planting the seeds to start a new work relationship. And so the goal of your pre-boarding, whatever it is that you choose to do, is to really create almost, for lack of a better term, like that stickiness with your new employee, to increase their engagement, increase their productivity, make them realize how much you are excited about not only having them there at your organization, but getting to know who they are as a human being and as a person. So Amanda just gave an example of how I researched and found out that purple was her favorite color. Well, I also was mindful and listened very carefully to different things she said throughout the interview process, and even made a phone call to some of her loved ones before she started and said, hey, don't let her know I'm reaching out to you, but what are some things she really enjoys? And I got her some popcorn, right? From, oh gosh, Pop Luck, I think is
Potluck.
the
Yeah.
organization. And I found out what her favorite Pop Luck flavors were. And, I knew that she loved a particular brand of a briefcase or purse. And so I got her a little something from that. And it was all different ways of conveying to Amanda. And this is something that I've always done with the people who report directly to me, but conveying to Amanda, hey, I see you, I'm excited to have you here, and I care about getting to know you as an individual and as a person, and we're going to have a great time getting to know each other. So that's all I would say. It's about the emotional connection experience, whereas onboarding is more so about the transactional experience, the meat and the potatoes.
And maybe I'll add, thank you, that was great, Elizabeth, and I'll add something on the onboarding process, and something that we've implemented here and something that some of our clients have implemented. But everyone does, a lot of people do 30, 60, 90-day reviews. And so that's fine, that's great. We do a 7-day conversation, a 30 and a 60 and a 90-day conversation. And so with Amanda, there was conversations at 7 days, with Elizabeth at 30, 60, and 90. And we've done that. Some of our clients have adopted that. And this is about understanding. And I was on one yesterday with a client, and the employee it's a great company and they have a great relationship, and it was a good conversation. But the employee there was a question about, have you ever seen, what could we do different? Was there anything we could do better to incorporate it? And one of the individuals pointed out, there's some us versus them in this particular area. And I noticed I'm going to be impacted, or it could negatively impact my ability to execute on some of the things that you want me to. And so they had a conversation about that. They had a conversation about what he was seeing, and the employer, said, I get it. And they started discussing ways to address it. And so again, it boils down to communication, but that 7-day, 30, 60, 90, and you can do a review and don't have this as part of the review. Have this as a conversation. How is it going here? Tell me what you like about working here. Is there anything you thought about and that we explained during the interview process that you think we are not fulfilling? And questions along those magnitudes. And then maybe we'll put, I think it would be a good idea to share the tools that we're using for the 7, 30, 60, 90. We'll share that as another piece for everyone to help guide those conversations.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you. I appreciate that feedback. Kind of leading into, this topic of communication and going back to, preboarding into onboarding. I think this is another example of a company that I think has a really interesting, some interesting aspects to their preboarding and onboarding processes. Communication is so key. There is absolutely nothing worse, and I'm sure we've all experienced this at one point or another, than bringing somebody onto your team and then leaving them hanging between the time that they've accepted the offer and the day that they start. There is absolutely nothing that feels more deflating than that. It's like, oh, well, I'm just a body filling a position. Great. I don't actually matter. So Buffer, social media management company for small businesses, as part of their pre-boarding process, they have 5 welcome emails. Each are very brief. They have a very clear purpose. Welcome to the team. Next one is collecting some information. my husband actually did something similar to this with the company that he works for. They had a brief survey that he filled out prior to starting with the company. He is a complete remote employee. The company is based in a different state, but he completed this survey about his hobbies and his favorite foods and what he likes to, one unique fact that he'd like to share with the team. And that was something that was then posted on their Slack channel for the entire team to see and send welcome messages to him as he started his new position. Again, introducing them to managers and peers, presenting tools that the new hires will use, and setting some expectations for their first day, sending them an agenda of here's how you're going to spend your time on that first day. Because again, it makes me sad that, you start at a company and your first day is a lot of paperwork and a lot of sitting at your desk wondering, what should I be doing right now? So setting those expectations ahead of time and being clear on that communication. They also have a really interesting program where they give you 3 partners for the onboarding process. So there is onboarding they have a hiring manager buddy, a culture buddy, and a role buddy. And these I just pulled actually from an article. I believe I got it through Glassdoor, where they describe what those roles look like. So, okay, here's what our onboarding manager buddies are responsible for. Okay, so you're going to work with this new candidate on the onboarding flow, orientation emails, ship the swag. These are your responsibilities. For the role buddies, understanding, okay, you're working directly with this person's manager to help them create the onboarding document. You'll meet at least once a week with your buddy to chat over role-specific topics and guide them toward working independently in their area and getting to know them. Again, kind of setting up those relationships within the organization so they have somebody to go to when they have questions. And the culture buddy. This person is responsible for really introducing them to the culture at Buffer. You're their guide as they learn and absorb everything, and you're expected to give coaching feedback, corrective feedback as needed. So giving, some ownership, not settling all of that solely on the shoulders of their supervisor. So it spreads out the workload a little bit. It allows for the candidate or the new hire to be more integrated within the organization because they're meeting more people, they're developing deeper relationships with more people right out of the gate as they start with your organization. So thinking beyond as well, because you do also have an opportunity through your offboarding process, because it's important to remember that happy former employees are also valuable ambassadors for your employer brand. You need to be engaged in your offboarding process. This is not a conversation where you just, throw them over to HR and say, oh, they're going to handle this. Because what that does is it leaves your employee that's exiting, especially if they're exiting on their own terms, they just feel ignored and undervalued. So, you have an opportunity to develop an understanding of why they're leaving your organization. You're not taking the time to ask them about it, to show that you care, that, oh, we're really sad to have you leaving, and start to understand why that's happening. From their perspective, it's, oh, well, they don't really care, so I'm just going to move on to this other position. And now I was, sad to be leaving my colleagues in the company that I built a relationship with over the years, to now this is a sour relationship because you didn't show that you cared. So using that offboarding process to obtain insights and using those insights to tweak your retention and hiring practices is equally as important. So Erin and Elizabeth, one final time here, any thoughts on the importance of having that consistent offboarding process that includes some discovery into why employees are exiting the organization?
I always found, there's certain times you really can't do an exit interview.
Sure.
But most of the time you can. And most of the time it's a conversation. And as you said, asking the questions, what drove this? And it's not about trying to convince them to stay. It has nothing. It's about learning, how do we get better? And when I would have those conversations, I'd say, I understand you're leaving. I want the best for you. But I was hoping that you could share and be open with me about certain things and work them through. a list of questions that help you get better. And then communicating that with the team. Again, remember, this is now we go back to the actions and taking actions on what we learn is, okay, we learned this from some of the, some of the exit interviews, and it's not one person. It's happening more and more. We've seen a trend here. What are we going to do about it? So having the conversation is important for to manage the person on the way out, but it's also extremely important for those that are remaining. What can we learn? How can we do things differently?
I think Aaron couldn't have said it any better. So I don't even think I have anything to add. So great job, Aaron.
Awesome. Well, thank you both, Aaron and Elizabeth. Really appreciate your feedback today. That brings us to the end, excuse me, of the presentation. And I would say, your takeaways for today, really making sure that you're practicing what you preach, because again, you can say this is a great place to work as much as you want, but if you're not walking the walk, all of that talk doesn't matter at all. So making sure that you're really staying consistent and putting effort into walking the walk. Our contact information, Elizabeth and myself, our cell numbers, our email addresses. Aaron's email address is also the same as ours, just Aaron Phillips, 2 L's 1 P, at decisionassociates.net. Certainly, we are here as a resource. If you have questions on today's presentation or just in general, we're happy to help you however we can. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We will also be sending a follow-up email with the link to the replay as well as some of the resources that we mentioned earlier in the session. So thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we'll be here if you need us.